Hello and welcome to the podcast Por Ti, For You, where we talk about mental well-being. Today we have a very, very special guest, Ruth Adamson, Europe, Middle East and Africa Engagement Manager at Z Zurich Foundation. We'll learn more about the work of this foundation, understand why mental well-being is such a top priority, and also discover how can we all together build a stronger and healthier community and communities. Ruth, thank you so much for being with us. So let's start by talking about what the Z Zurich Foundation is and its contribution to making our world a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. The Z Zurich Foundation is the charitable arm of Zurich Insurance Group, essentially. And we work, our red thread through all of the work that we do is to create a brighter future and improve lives globally for vulnerable people. So all of our work is around that central premise of improving lives. We do that through measuring impact, and we have 4 strategic pillars through which we do that. Our improving mental well-being pillar, which focuses on prevention and promotion, especially amongst young people. We have our enabling social equity pillar, which focuses on employability, entrepreneurship, and education. We also have our adapting to climate change pillar, which focuses on the very real and present consequences of natural hazards, and we focus on reducing or mitigating the risk to communities that face those hazards presently. And then we also have our response to crisis pillar, which focuses on the humanitarian response to crises, whether that be conflict-based or, again, natural hazard-based or nature-based.
And do tell us, how did you come to have this role?
Yeah, interesting. I've been with Zurich as an organisation for coming up, it was 11 years at the beginning of this week. I mean, time flies, right? So throughout my entire time at Zurich, the one thing that was a consistent, I changed roles a lot. So I think within 5 years, I had 5 different roles in the company, from finance to customer service to learning and development. I didn't stay still for very long. But the constant throughout all of those roles was being part of the Charity and Community Committee. And I took on the role as champion for the Z Zurich Foundation for the Isle of Man, where I'm based. And through that, my connection with the foundation really blossomed as I established a mental wellbeing programme in the Isle of Man as well with the foundation's support. So I know exactly what the team in Portugal, Zurich, Portugal here, went through applying to the foundation and all of that to support mental wellbeing in Portugal, because I did it in the Isle of Man. And fortunately, through that relationship that developed with the foundation, the connection that I made with them, and getting really close to the work that they do and the impact that they have. When this role came up, I thought, I'll regret it if I don't throw my hat in the ring. And here I am now. Thankfully, it worked out, and I was able to make that transition from the business side into the foundation.
Have you ever had in your past any sense of mission towards this kind of subjects?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's really driven it for me, and maybe the reason why I changed roles so much within Zurich, was I came back to the same motivation, which was around creating impact for people. So the roles that I had, and honestly, I think when I worked in the finance department, they're still finding mistakes that I made from 10 years ago. So they're probably very glad I moved on. But I always veered more towards the human connection. And that's why ending up in learning and development and HR specifically was something that was particularly powerful for me. So I would say that was almost the internal inclination. I kept going back to that people drive and supporting people so I think for me that's what it was about. And in my personal life, I was very much connected to charity in terms of I used to be a guide leader So, the Girl Guides. So I've been involved with the guides all the way from when I was 7 and I was a brownie, and I continued all the way through to be a leader. And again, having that connection, especially with young girls and women, to help them thrive in the world was, always special to me. So
the world is a place that is constantly evolving, as we know, but it has been evolving in a speed which is a lot faster one for the past 30 years rather than what it used to be. So why, in your opinion, has mental well-being become a global concern?
I think the reality of the situation is that we've had a silent pandemic when it comes to mental well-being, and I would say in particular youth mental well-being. I think the COVID-19 crisis absolutely brought some of that narrative further to the front, and it really highlighted especially the plight of young people when we started to compound all of those issues that obviously COVID exacerbated as well. But I think what it's really done in recent years, and I think the narrative has evolved, like you said, but I think in more recent years what we've been able to do is really see the extent of how much mental well-being, and in particular negative mental well-being, really does pervade across the entirety of society. This isn't something that is, affecting one demographic in one area. Everybody has mental health and well-being. Everybody. Doesn't matter where you're born, how rich you are, how poor you are, where you go to school, where you work. Everybody has mental health and well-being. And it also isn't a luxury to have positive mental well-being. That's something, it can't be a luxury because we all have it.
But isn't it becoming a luxury nowadays to have that?
Interesting question. Look at you throwing that in there. But I think thankfully in some circumstances, I would say yes, in the sense of stigma still pervades. So having safe psychological places, emotionally literate environments to be able to talk about mental well-being in an open and unjudged way is still very difficult, and it's especially difficult in certain parts of the world. That stigma is still pervasive. What we are seeing, though, and again, COVID-19 opened the door to a lot more of that stigma maybe being reduced to some extent, but what we are seeing through programmes like Porty and the other programmes that we have globally across the world is that those safe spaces are starting to be opened up, that the conversation is beginning to be opened, is that young people and all of the individuals in their ecosystem and in their networks are being supplied with the tools and the ability.
Yeah, but it differs, right? It differs. And the approaches are definitely paramount in order to have success. What are the most effective approaches to promoting mental health? Yeah,
completely agree. So you're absolutely right. It's completely different. And that's why being almost bespoke and having a level of specificity and that data and that knowledge of what is going to be that in your particular location is exceedingly important. So we definitely see that there is a universal nature to mental well-being, like I was saying, in the sense of everybody has it, the same as we have road safety, for young people, we should be having positive mental well-being lessons for young people. And what also is universal is that prevention and promotion approach. So promotion is about creating those environments that are, like I was saying, psychologically kind of safe, that are, there's a common kind of understanding when people are talking about.
Can you provide some examples, specific examples, in order to go beyond just the concept, which is a very good thing, but examples help all of us understand more how can it be more effective?
Absolutely. So in terms of, if I start to think about, and we see this in a number of programs, so if we think about the Porty program, for example, their initial promotion exercises in terms of going into schools, doing that general, and they have a general 2-hour workshop that starts to talk to young people about, okay, how do you recognise your emotions? What are your trigger points? What are, what are some of those moments? And I love the way, I was saying earlier that I had the privilege of watching one of these sessions sessions yesterday, and they introduced music and the impact that music and how that stirs up emotions and all of that. So again, bringing in those really relevant and clinically evidenced ways to connect with young people to be able to, to get them to start thinking about their emotions and how they can put a name to them and identify them and be able to confront them. Rather than, kind of going, actually, I can push that down. That can, because that never works in the long term, right? Pushing those emotions down. So being able to talk...
Yeah, but sorry to interrupt you, Ruth, but automatically most people, or a lot of people at least, do think like, I'll not think about this for the time being. Maybe I'll think about it, and they never end up thinking about it and reflecting on what happened, right?
Yeah, and that's when we start to see almost that layering, isn't it? And that's when we get the trigger points. So there's an even more kind of amplified reaction because there's almost that kind of baggage that's being brought along because we haven't learnt those techniques and built that resilience to be able to, I loved it. Yesterday, the young people were asked, what do you do to deal with stress? And one of them said, sleep. I go to sleep. And one of the colleagues I was with said, oh, yeah, no, definitely. I use sleep as well. You kind of go, tomorrow's another day. And I think there's an element there of being able to go, yeah, if we don't deal with stress when we have it, that you then start to think about, okay, maybe not sleeping well, panicking about it. And it all adds up and builds up and exacerbates. And we get that layering of it. So when we're talking about the promotion element, there's about creating those atmospheres to be able to have those conversations and having those sessions, for example, that Porty have, and we see them in other mental wellbeing. So the one on the Isle of Man is called I'll Listen. It's ISLE, just to, I'll. But they that does the same. They have big assemblies that talk to young people about this. They have low-level listening wellbeing practitioners in the schools, the same as Porty have the psychologists that are able to engage with young people after the sessions as well. So being able to access those trained professionals is super important.
And how do you adapt? You could just mention two programs on two different countries with two very much different cultures.
Yes.
And two European countries, but with two different cultures. And the matter of well-being passes all human beings, of course, all across the world. But everyone has, concerning on their latitude, different perspectives. How do you adapt your approach depending on the region as a regional engagement manager?
Local expert partners. And trusting them and listening to them. So all of our local grants of this nature are what we call business unit led. So the business unit come to us and they confirm that they are wanting to tackle this particular issue, that they've got the data, that they've got the information, and they understand the context that they're wanting to impact and to create a positive change within. And what they also do is they come to us and they say, we've got some ideas around who are these really good partners to be able to work in that space. And we as an organisation that operates globally have to trust in those partners and have to develop that relationship with them, which is predominantly my role, to really understand and get underneath the skin of the problem in that particular country. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Even though mental well-being as a topic is universal, the way that we approach it has got to be relevant to the locales that are wanting to confront the issue. And it is those local partners that work on the ground, that understand the young people that we're going to be dealing with, understand the broader environment and cultural context that we're operating within, that can bring their expertise and their knowledge around the issue.
Are there any differences between the Western world and other parts of the world like the Far East, the way people act and react to issues, and how do they evolve?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think coming back to the point around stigma in particular, and we definitely see kind of cross-borderal differences between the level of stigma. And that can also be within countries as well, that it's, rural versus urban. It can be, again, a very different approach. But no, I'd absolutely agree in terms of we have some really interesting programs in Hong Kong, for example, where they use a lot of virtual and augmented reality to open up these scenarios and situations, because young people find it easier to engage almost with the virtual world to begin with, to open up those conversations. Whereas I'd say in Europe in particular, it's a lot more kind of talking therapy based and being able to draw these pieces out through direct conversation. So we definitely see some of those differences across borders.
What stories or moments have impacted you the most?
Oh, so I'm quite an emotional person, so I kind of tear up quite easily at a lot of things. But I'm always struck. We have our annual reporting cycle, and we get our impact reports from business units. And part of that as well is we start to get videos that come in, and we start to get quotes and photos. And I have to admit, when I start going through those reports, I have to have a box of tissues sat on the table with me, because just reading, and it is very much, shall I say, unfiltered expressions of appreciation from young people, from parents, from teachers, who, you know, are saying just how much impact that they've had from the programs. And I know we can kind of bandy around. Bandy is maybe the wrong word, but we can kind of express these statistics of 1 in 7 young people, affected by poor mental health, and and we're talking about, said earlier, 75% of them developed by the age of 24, etc. But actually, what this comes down to, what the crux of this is that there are lives under all of those statistics. And thankfully, through the work that I do, I get to see and experience directly the positive impact that happens on those lives. We have young people, that tell us how they're more confident they can actually go back to school. I mean, absenteeism amongst young people, with poor mental health is exceptionally, it is an issue. And, they're saying that actually I got the confidence and I built the resilience to be able to go back into school, to start my learning again. And when you start to think about the knock-on effect that has on the rest of their lives, and on, and even on their families, on siblings, on parents they're struggling, because they don't know where to turn, they don't know what to do. And then, they find our programs, and they find, the trained professionals that are there to support them. I have to admit, it gets quite overwhelming, but it's so powerful.
And I imagine that it also gets difficult when certain challenges appear in front of you. What are the main challenges that these programs might have, and how do they overcome them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, stigma, like I was saying before, still pervades. And I mean, no matter how advanced a society maybe thinks it is, there's absolutely areas of them. And I still hear, where I'm from in the Isle of Man, I still hear people saying things like, oh, we didn't have these problems in my day. Oh, you absolutely did.
Maybe you just did not talk about them.
Yes. And if you were fortunate enough, or maybe had the means and the resources to not be confronted with those issues, then I'm really pleased for you. But actually, we absolutely did have these issues, and that's something. So stigma's definitely still there. And I think it's, again, about opening the conversations. And we are starting to build the data sets and the data fields that can really contribute and kind of say, we know that prevention and promotion works. We're seeing the impact. We're seeing the results and the outcomes of this. So we're starting to build that piece. We released a white paper on the state of youth mental well-being in Europe. And actually, again, just reading that and reading through the programmes in Turkey, in Ireland, in the UK, in the Isle of Man, in Portugal, in Spain.
How do we, Portugal, stand in Europe and globally?
Yeah. So, I mean, if we start to looking at some of the statistics, generally, not many countries stand great when it comes to, particularly, we're talking about barriers here, funding mental well-being. So if we start to look at the percentages of health budgets that go towards mental well-being, especially if we start looking at prevention and promotion, we're talking single digits. It's really not a large percentage. Most governments and spending is focused on treatment, medication.
Although being announced by the government as a big priority, just like what happened in Portugal during the pandemic, the government announced that the mental health was going to be a huge priority, and 5 years on, it's still basically at the same level.
If we're looking at it from a funding perspective, yes, very little has shifted, and that isn't just in Portugal, but that's across many, many countries. So, and also the kind of the coming together of different sectors and organisations to really tackle this holistically. So, like we were saying before, mental well-being isn't just an issue for schools, even though reaching young people can happen en masse in schools, and that's where they spend a large majority of their time, really, so it makes absolute sense going into schools. But mental well-being touches everything. If we start to think of the intersectionality, so the programme we have in the UK, for example, focuses on young people with autism and their mental well-being. And that's because when you start to look at the statistics for that particular demographic, the percentage chance of them having a mental health and well-being condition dramatically increases due to the autism diagnosis as well. So, when we start to look at that intersectionality and the layering of vulnerability that can happen, we're not seeing that kind of cross-sector coming together of actors to tackle mental well-being in that holistic.
Yeah, and we're a group, we're a society, we are families, we are a group of friends, we have a set of co-workers. So it's a network, so to say, of people, yes. Which means that our mental health is also influenced by what happens around us, right? So what can each of us do individually in our daily lives to support those around us and also take care at the same time of ourselves?
Love it. So, one of the first things that I would say is it's important for us all to recognise that it's okay to not be okay. And being able to have those open conversations. I was watching a programme recently, and the person on it said, look after your community. And that doesn't mean, everybody that lives in your particular large area. That means who are the people that are closest to you, and how many times do you ask them, are you okay? It can start with a simple question, are you okay? How are you doing? And it's just about opening that first
being
door.
Genuine about it is mandatory, right?
Oh, absolutely. You can't just, you can't expect to enter that conversation, because if the person comes back to you and says, I'm not doing well, oh, never mind then, thanks, bye. No, right? It's got to be the genuine, and that's why it doesn't have to be masses of people. You don't have to be, we haven't really touched on social media, but the massive part that plays, and I think our previous speaker was talking about, the kind of persona and what people put out. This is about the genuine, you as an individual, your authentic self, going out to those closest to you and saying, are you okay?
Yeah, but being your authentic self might also mean having to look at yourself and accept what you are as a person. And that might not be the best of things, especially when you look at social media and you see just perfection, right?
Oh, all the time. So my social media, thankfully, I've trained my algorithm that I get all of those ones. That is, people that are kind of waking up and filming themselves directly getting out of bed going, and that is what I fill my algorithm with, because honestly, I can't. It would drive me insane, and I absolutely know that it would. But that is, again, a self-reflection and a self-recognition of what is it that I want to surround myself with, and being very conscious of my triggers and what I know will set off my imposter syndrome. When you said I was an esteemed guest, when you kind of introduced me, I was like, I really don't feel like it. I've got a judo superstar and a TV personality kind of surrounding me, like, oh my gosh. And I'm just Ruth from the Isle of Man, so it's kind of, so recognising those triggers is really important. But I think as well, we're not all perfect. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to get every conversation right. But the important thing is about saying, I'm here for you. I am here for you, and I might not get it right, just the same as I know you're here for me. And I might not get it right, but if, a problem shared is a problem halved. So let's start there.
You've had several messages, very good ones, and we're very proud to have you directly from the Isle of Man here in Portugal. You've had several messages. What would you like for our viewers and listeners to take away as a main message, to memorize it and to do something about it out of our conversation?
Coming back to what you were saying around, from a kind of political narrative perspective, and again, even on social media, a lot of influencers, etc., talk about mental well-being and things like that. What I would say is, the conversation is open. There is a door open. And I would ask all of the viewers and everybody at home possibly watching this, or listening to this, to take up that mantle and say, if this is something you care about, turn those words into action. That doesn't have to be a big action. That doesn't mean that you have to go out picketing in the streets or doing whatever. But that might be, if it's your young person, for example, you are a parent or a caregiver, go to their school and say, what's the mental well-being lessons that you're giving them? Oh, did you know that there's a Portee program that could do that? Did you know, is that something you're doing? How are you looking after the mental well-being of our young people? And I would say it can be as small an action as that, asking a question, writing to your local politician, getting them to stand up for what they said in their manifesto. I know that there was elections recently, so it's probably...
And we'll be having a new election next January as well.
So, it's going to be a hot topic. So, asking people to turn those words into action. And we have solutions. We have, scalable programs that have got the clinical evidence and rigor behind them to make an impact and make a change.
Ruth, thank you so much. It was lovely to have this conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
This podcast is supported by Jornal Expresso as a media partner and part of the Portee program promoting mental well-being in schools, which is an initiative by Zurich, Portugal, funded by the Z Zurich Foundation in partnership with EPIS and the Cognitive Behavioral Clinical Psychology unit of the University of Coimbra. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you next time.